Hey everybody! In this video I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about a trip my wife and I, Heather, took down to Occupy Wall Street a couple of weeks ago. I really wanted to go down and see this movement firsthand and talk to some of the people that were actually down there occupying Zuccotti Park. If you'd listened to a lot of the mainstream media reports recently about this movement, you may have the thought that this is a very disorganized group of hippies and homeless people that are just looking for money and whining about things and have no real clear direction or reason that they're out there protesting. And I really wanted to get down there and really see if that was in fact the case. The first thing that I found really interesting, and you'll see that in this picture right here, before you actually enter Zuccotti Park, there's these good neighbor policies posted all around. This is a agreed list of really, I guess, rules, so to speak, that the Occupy Wall Street movement has kind of posted up for conduct within the park. As we got a little bit deeper into the park, it was also very evident that, and probably one of the most interesting things to me about being in the park, was the demographics of all the different protesters. Actually, I saw, honestly, probably a lot less younger people than I did people kind of middle-aged and even a lot of older folks out there. Another thing that you hear a lot with the media around these Occupy Wall Street protests is about a lack of organization. That was another thing that was a little bit different, actually, when I got down there into the park. This first picture that you see is actually of the first aid tent. This next picture is actually of the library. This picture right here is actually of the kitchen. And this one was especially interesting to go back through because after Heather and I had a chance to go down and visit the park, the New York Police Department, of course, completely eradicated all the protesters from the park. And one of the main reasons they cited was the unsanitary, unsafe conditions. That was especially interesting, as you can see in pictures like this clearly. All the volunteers that are working here in this food kitchen all have the proper gloves and wash buckets, and really sanitation was a very key concern, you could tell, going within the park. After we took the trip to Occupy Wall Street, we headed down to Chinatown. And if any of you have ever been to Chinatown in New York City, you know that it's not probably the most sanitary place. You don't get a feel of sanitation when you're in Chinatown. And it was just very interesting that just a few blocks away, that's kind of the area that's there, but yet this was the unsanitary part of New York City. Also around that topic of organization, we found whiteboards like this all around the park. You also saw boards like this in the information tent that really outlined all the day's activities. That's everything from protests to working groups to the General Assembly. But one of the things that I really hear throughout the media is that there's no clear, concise message. And this is the one that's probably the most interesting to me because really, if you're listening directly to the group or you follow the OWS hashtag or the N17 hashtags or take a look at any of the different various websites or videos that have been posted or Occupy Wall Street subreddits, really I think the point of the movement is really pretty clear. I spent a couple of hours in Zuccotti Park really just walking around and talking to people to try to hear firsthand from them, why are you here? That seems to be the #1 question that continues to be asked by a lot of the mainstream media, and so I really wanted to hear directly from them what the answer was to that. And really surprisingly, if you listen to a lot of the different reports that are flying around, they seem to have a pretty concise and clear point for being there. And if I had to summarize that from what I heard from them, it is essentially that corporations have, through their power, influence, and money, been able to completely control the government in a way that allows them to get benefits that the common person does not get, oftentimes on the back of that common person. Now, despite all that being the case, as you would certainly see with any large collection of people, especially people out protesting a particular cause, there are several people that have their own agenda, as you're going to have. I definitely met people down there that seemed to be primarily there for handouts, to receive free food and receive money. But I'd really caution about picking those people out as the representation of the movement. And I think about a similar movement that was a bit more right-leaning that happened, and apparently it's okay to protest the government, but as soon as you start to protest the corporations that run that government, apparently that's a little bit of a different problem. I mean, just take a look at some of these pictures from some of those Tea Party rallies. This guy, for instance. We certainly wouldn't expect that he represents the entire movement. Or a lot of signs like this. The Tea Party certainly had some very racially charged signs, but again, we wouldn't just assume that everybody that agrees with the Tea Party or some of the things they stand for is automatically a racist or thinks Obama's a Nazi. I mean, it's ridiculous. Just to note, and again, just to be fair, the Tea Party also had its share of drum circles. They also had their share of people dressed pretty crazy. And certainly the Tea Party had their share of crazy idiots, like this lady. The one stark contrast I see in the way that that particular movement was treated versus the Occupy Wall Street group is really how the police have responded. Just to show you an example of the clear contrast between the two, take a look at this picture. This is an 84-year-old woman who was pepper sprayed by the police department, apparently because they were so fearful for their own safety that they thought this was the proper approach to take with her. Just imagine, if you will, if this was the approach they took with an 84-year-old woman protesting, imagine what they would have done with this guy. Well, we all remember this guy. This is a guy that showed up at one of the Tea Party rallies. Can you imagine if a black guy with a semi-automatic rifle showed up at an Occupy Wall Street protest? Exactly. So where does that leave me? Well, even though I certainly don't agree with all of the things that Occupy Wall Street stands for, and I certainly don't agree with all of the people that are down there protesting, I do definitely agree with their core central issue, and that is that corporations have too much power, influence, and control over our government at the expense of the people. I don't think that is any more evident than in this particular graphic that I've put together. This is very interesting. The chart that you see over on the left-hand side of this is directly from the Government Accountability Office's audit of the Federal Reserve. This audit was to find out where $16 trillion of taxpayer money went during the bailouts. I put that list of the recipients of these $16 trillion in bailouts side by side with a group of the top campaign contributors for the last 20 years. I've sorted this list by contributors that give equally to both parties, as I really feel like that's really the true sign of corruption when you support both political parties equally. That's essentially saying I've bought both sides rather than just one of the sides. You can see a lot of similarities in this list. I don't know about you guys, but where I'm from, if a small group of unelected, unregulated bankers takes $16 trillion from all the rest of us and gives it to this small group of their best friends, not only is that robbery, but it's certainly fraud at the grandest scale. Some people have made the argument even that this $16 trillion in bailouts isn't really coming from the taxpayer. They'll say, well, this is money that is created by the Federal Reserve and therefore, you know, we're not being taxed for it. And that is just a naive and a plain wrong, I think, way to look at it, because every time they print dollars, anytime there's more money printed and put into the money supply, that is what causes inflation. The more money there is out there, the less the dollars are worth that we have received for our labor as a group of people. So that's why you see these huge inflation rates. And so that's probably, in my opinion, the worst kind of robbery there is. Instead of taking the money from you, they're literally stealing the value of the money directly from the money that's in your pockets. So all in all, I have to say I do stand with Occupy Wall Street and support the 99%.